So maybe some awkward starts here.
Yeah, and Abe wants to slow things down even further. Going to go ahead and cast Blink of an Eye on that Llanowar Elves. Josh going to take a draw here.
Missing out on all of that Callous Dismissal value.
Yeah, too bad. Next time. Abe's going to go ahead and fire off Growth Spiral here. Look to develop mana a little bit. Does have the land for it. Looks like he may have a follow-up play here as he played an untapped Breeding Pool. Going to fall to 18. Passes the turn back to Joshua Stewart. And Josh is going to deploy Merfolk Branchwalker. That's going to reveal Hydroid Krasis. Hits the bin, looking for that second land.
Well, I was going to look up the deck list. I don't know what P-Sully did, but he broke our surface.
He has destroyed our computer somehow.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
He's a bit of a Luddite, not really into computers. That makes sense to me.
He was just giving away computers yesterday.
That's true. That's how little he needs them. Wilderness Reclamation is the play from Abraham Stein here. Big start for the Simic Nexus player, especially when his opponent is just doing nothing.
Well, Josh was doing his best.
Right. No lands. Tough to get the job done with no lands.
He's got a lot of Llanowar Elves, though.
That's true.
The problem is that Joshua is basically just starting to play the game now on turn 5, whereas Abe is so far ahead after 2 Growth Spirals and a Wilderness Reclamation. So I find it very hard to believe that Joshua can come back here, but it all really depends on what Abe is working with. If he's able to get his engine fully up and running, the game is going to be over momentarily.
Yeah, and I think this is a tough matchup in Game 1 for Sultai anyway. They get some tools in post-board games. They'll often have counter magic, which really helps out a lot. A little bit more disruption. But Game 1, this is kind of what Simic Nexus lives for. You love to see Sultai across the table, especially in Game 1.
Yeah, which is kind of weird because Sultai, I agree, is one of the stronger matchups for Simic Nexus, but going in, I think everyone knew that Sultai was not going to be very big.
Right.
So it kind of sucks from the Simic Nexus side, right? Like, you know that one of your best matchups is like slowly dissipating in the format.
Well, Abe Stein has Nexus of Fate in hand already, ready to start taking all the turns.
That's the second one.
Yeah.
Already fired off one, basically just looking for Chemister's Insight, search for Escanta, anything that can actually start drawing him cards. And
there is search for Escanta. And Abe's still going to have the mana to be able to fire off that Nexus of Fate this turn if he so chooses. And there you go. 7 mana is tapped. Nexus of Fate is cast. Abe Stein getting ready to take another turn here.
Whee!
Yep. Going to do a little shuffling, as we like to do with Nexus of Fate. Abe's going to flash his Nexus for the camera. So kind. Pretty stock looking list here from Abe Stein. Abe really trying to smooth out that search for Escanta. You want your search as flat as possible. Just helps mechanically.
I think you want your pieces of cardboard as flat as possible.
That's a good rule. Me playing with foils and living in the Pacific Northwest, I spend a lot of time pressing my cards between heavy books.
Yeah, heavy books are nice to have.
That's how you know you've purchased good cardboard, is when you get to spend your time squishing it.
Yeah, I went to a Pro Tour in San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Yep.
And the players, the local players, spent a lot of time trying to sell their foils to the dealer booth there because they're basically unplayable due to the humidity in San Juan.
I could see that. I've been to a GP in Costa Rica, which is similarly humid. I don't remember the foil exodus, though, going down. Looks like Abe has revealed Callous Dismissal. Josh says, I would like to take a read of that. It's kind of a silly card. Josh doesn't do a whole lot, but does enough to win the game for Simic Nexus, eventually. Well, Abe not accomplishing all that much here. Josh finally has access to some mana.
Yeah, was spinning his wheels a little bit, got to take a couple turns, make some land drops, eventually found a Search for Azcanta, but has not managed to transform it quite yet, mostly due to Nexus of Fate being a jerk and getting shuffled back into your deck.
Yeah. Bit of a double-edged sword there. Of course, this deck doesn't work if it doesn't get shuffled back, but it feels bad sometimes.
Well, you talked yesterday about the Search for Azcanta with 6 cards in the graveyard and Nexus of Fate being on top and not allowing you to actually transform your search.
Right. In the vast majority of spots, it just doesn't matter because you just cast the Nexus of Fate. But when you have 6 lands, it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. Here comes an attack from Josh Stewart. Abe ready to fire off a Root Snare, prevent that damage. Going to stay at a comfortable 12 life presently. Can Josh do anything to disrupt Abe's game plan? Looks like he's going to cast a big Hydroid Crisis here. Draw a couple cards. Is tapped low, though, and Abe Stein with Search ready to transform. Wilderness Reclamation available. Going to bin a land, flip over that Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. And now we can get to work as Abe Stein starts looking at the top 4 cards of his library. No Nexus there. I did see a Root Snare. And he is going to take that card. And that's the thing that's really backbreaking is you don't pressure all that fast as the Sultai midrange deck. And Abe's just going to have time to find these Root Snares, blunt these attacks, and just do what he has to do.
Yeah, I mean, Root Snare is effectively another copy of Nexus of Fate, at least game 1 in this matchup.
Yeah, and now Abe takes a second copy into hand, 2 copies of Root Snare waiting for these attacks from Josh Stewart, and Josh with no other real way to do damage. Really looking for something like Vivian to maybe get that Wilderness Reclamation off the table, lead Abe Stein into some super awkward draws, but it does not look good at this juncture for Josh Stewart.
Yeah, so in Josh's main deck, 2 copies of Vivian Reed, 1 Ugin the Ineffable. Ooh, a Tyrant Scorn too. That's kind of nice.
Nice little pickup.
Yeah, you can get some pretty good value out of the unsummoned effects in your Sultai deck. But other than those cards, yeah, not a whole lot to actually interact. Also 1 copy of Assassin's Trophy, but it's like 6 cards effectively in the main deck that actually do anything in this matchup.
Yeah, not a whole lot of effectiveness from the Sultai deck.
But Abe just continuing to do his thing, activating Search, casting some Root Snares, picks up another copy of Wilderness Reclamation, which is just going to allow all of this stuff to spiral out of control. Each reclamation leads to another Azcanta activation, and picked up another copy of Wilderness Reclamation.
Yep. Yeah, this game has felt a little bit like old Simic Nexus. He hasn't had the Tamiyo to accelerate this whole process. This game is ostensibly over.
Especially now.
Now it's definitely over.
Yeah, Nexus of Fate with effectively 3 Wilderness Reclamations. You're looking at, I don't know, 100 cards every turn, give or take.
That math checks out.
Yeah.
I think that's spot on.
I'm not a Ross Merriam or a Matthias Hunt. I'm not a math guy, but
Abe taking this new turn. 2 Wilderness Reclamations at the ready, a 3rd one in hand. Search already flipped. All the pieces in place to take all of the turns very soon. Gonna go ahead, tap a bunch of mana here. Assuming we're searching an end step, finds just an opt. Nothing too exciting yet.
How do you feel about tapping the Wilderness Reclamation versus putting it upside down? I like upside down.
I'm going to tell you right now, I've never actually put a Wilderness Reclamation into play in real life.
Wild.
So I just haven't had the circumstance to play Standard Magic. I mostly commentate and come here and do this, so those are my play opportunities I use to talk to you about Magic instead. I've obviously played a ton with the deck on Arena, but I've never had to manage Wilderness Reclamations in physical play before.
Oh, that should be fun.
I would probably go upside down. That would be my usage. I think the most important thing is finding a system that works for you and just sticking to it. Here's the Tamiyo. Josh Stewart, not big on preserving clock, not looking to scoop here. I think this would be a very safe scoop from Josh, but he's going to have Abe continue to play it out here. Abe's going to activate Search again. Excuse me. Escon to the Sunken Ruin again. There's another Nexus of Fate.
He's already got a turn banked.
Yep. There's 2 now.
Yeah, Tamio in hand, looking at a bunch of cards every turn. I'm sure is it deterministic at this point? I think Josh just wanted to see how Abe would actually kill him.
And Abe's explaining, at some point, my deck will be just Nexus of Fates. I will continually return Callous Dismissal to my hand with Tamio, bounce all your permanents, make an army.
And I'll attack. If you have something like Vraska's Contempt to get rid of the token, you can still just Tamio it back indefinitely.
And Josh says, okay, go ahead, do it.
Yeah, show me your combo.
So we're going to be here for a while, I think.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Yikes. Can I go to the restroom?
Sure, yeah, do what you got to do. I'm going to get a snack.
Okay.
Can you tell me some stories from this last Mythic Championship as we watch Abe do out this almost deterministic kill? Anything exciting happened at the Mythic Championship to you?
I didn't play for very many rounds.
Okay.
So not a whole lot of stories to tell there. Following that, I did not play in the pre-release Grand Prix held at the Magic Fest.
Okay. What did you think about that whole process of having that be the spot to debut a new set?
Well, I don't want to be overly negative, but I don't think it was great. I know that some local stores suffered as a result, certainly. I also know that there were several people who showed up to the Grand Prix because it was marketed kind of as a pre-release Grand Prix, yet the only real events they had were the 4 flights for the main event and then 1 double up sealed on Sunday, I believe.
Oh, so not even like the usual side event?
Yeah, so I would have expected maybe some War of the Spark drafts, probably not drafts, but certainly like some smaller sealed events that would mimic the pre-release experience if you didn't want to play in the actual Grand Prix itself. And those things just didn't exist, so kind of a little weird.
Yeah, that is a strange approach.
I feel like the messaging was just off a little bit, you know? So some people were a little unhappy with that. If you wanted to draft, you had to do RNA or like Ultimate Masters, stuff like that, which is like normal for a GP and like generally acceptable. Certainly, like people show up, those events fire, people do want to participate in that sort of stuff. But I think for this tournament specifically, people were there to play War of the Spark.
Right.
And it was just not really available to them unless they wanted to pay like the 80 pounds or whatever to play in the main event.
Yeah, that's a bit of a shame. The buzz has been high around War of the Spark, though, I will say that. People seem very excited to see new cards in action. Unfortunately, the constructed format didn't highlight it, but we're highlighting it today. Loving seeing these War of the Spark cards do their thing. There is a Tamio in play doing its thing.
Well, if the MC had War of the Spark cards, I think we would have seen the decks like Neoform, like Allosaurus Rider,
absolutely.
Neoform.
Absolutely, especially with the London Mulligan being present.
Right, and I think the tournament would have just been worse as a result. I don't think that they necessarily foresaw that happening, but I do think it ended up being better as a result.
Mm-hmm. Do you have an opinion on the London Mulligan you want to share with our viewers right now as we watch Abe, who just 1,000% has this game won, and I do not understand why Josh Stewert is not scooping, but we'll talk about other things.
I mean, he's only got 3 turns in the bank.
4 Wilderness Reclamations.
57 mana floating.
Right.
What were we talking about? London Mulligan?
Yeah.
I think it is great for low-powered formats. I think in formats like Modern, where the key turn is basically like turn 3, turn 4, you see a lot of decks actually striving to kill on turn 4 in the format. I don't really like how it basically homogenizes draws from those decks that make the games play out like basically very similarly.
Right.
You know, so the whole goal of the London Mulligan is to try and avoid repeat performances of things like Louis Scott Vargas mulliganing to 4 in the finals of one of the Pro Tours against Andrew Ellenbogen.
Wait, hold on. I have an update from this match. Josh has left.
He's just gone?
He F6'd.
That is gas.
He's going to the restroom, and he's having a judge watch Abe do his thing. I don't understand what this accomplishes for Josh. I think he wants the time on the clock. This is not beneficial.
I agree.
To his game plan. I don't know if he doesn't understand how the kill works, or I couldn't tell you. I honestly do not know. But the judge will check on Abe. And I'm sorry to interrupt, Jerry. You may continue telling your story of the London Mulligan. I agree with everything you're saying about it. I think that in the lower power formats, it's fantastic. And especially limited, I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, you want to avoid non-games, which I understand. But in Modern, I don't think that that's necessarily that big of an issue. Like, how many times does your opponent, mulligan to 4 because they have a bunch of 0-land hands or whatever? Usually, if this happens in Modern, you're playing against something like Dredge, and you're mulliganing aggressively for like a Leyline to the Void.
Yeah.
Something along those lines. And obviously, if you end up not playing any lands, not casting any spells, that sucks. It's not good for viewership, whatever, but that's just kind of a function of the format where you have these decks that are very difficult to interact with. Like, they're doing things on like this very weird axis. So to fix that problem, I would kind of like to see more incidental graveyard hate kind of tacked onto cards, more things that are good against non-basic lands that are tacked onto cards, rather than it's just like, okay, you have 4 Leyline of the Voids in your sideboard, you have to find one, otherwise you lose.
Right.
And I guess to that end, too, you don't necessarily want it to be like, okay, here's a bunch of like good one-sided Magus of the Moons or Yixla Jailers that are like creatures that are fine enough on Wraith that you can main deck or whatever. I would also want decks like Dredge or Tron or whatever to have some counterplay to those cards, because I think it would make it more interesting.
Right.
So it does work both ways. But realistically, I don't think that Modern necessarily had the problem of we don't want someone to mull to 4 on camera. And
I have to say I've really come around to the idea of possibly bifurcating the mulligans across formats. At first, I thought that was a little clunky, inelegant, and possibly would lead to some misunderstandings. But when you think about the level of comprehension that's required to understand the differences between something like Modern and Standard, at that point, once you have that comprehension, I think different mulligan rules are just fine and acceptable, and players would adapt to them pretty readily.
I think you can give some credit to your player base.
Agreed.
There is a reason why Magic is the most popular, at least card game, right? Or trading card game.
Yeah.
And it's because of the depth. It is deep. It is interesting. It's dynamic. And I'm sitting here looking at this room full of players who are here just to play this game. They love it. They love the fact that it's deep. They want new sets to come out, give them this additional puzzle to solve. It's challenging. It's hard. Mm-hmm. That's why we like it.
Yeah.
And I think to say things like sideboarding's too complicated or different rule sets are too complicated, I think it's just kind of ridiculous. And also, they do that already. There are different mulligan rules for different formats already. Things like Two-Headed Giant, Commander.
Right.
It already exists.
Right. Yeah, I think you're spot on, and it'll be interesting to see what Wizards ultimately decides to do with the mulligan rule.
There's certainly a limit, right? You can't make the formats so different, right? You can't have, one be chess and one be like, I don't know, football or something, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense. That's too big of a disparity. But for simple things like just a mulligan rule, and ultimately they're very small too. It's not like you're working with different hand sizes or different deck building requirements or things like that. It's just like, here are the cards that are legal. This is how you handle the opening game procedure.
Yep.
Sideboarding's still the same. The gameplay's the same,
Yep. Yeah, I think as soon as you require like knowledge of a ban list, your arguments that players can't handle different rules is kind of out the window.
Right.
Well, here's a second copy of Callous Dismissal being cast. That's off a cashed-in Tamiyo.
The army's coming.
The army's now 2 power and toughness. Here's another Tamiyo. What are we doing here, Josh Stewart? Why are we doing this? Please explain to me.
I love that Abe is doing this and just like doing it very quickly too. Like,
yeah, he's left without a choice here. He's got 6 turns set up.
6 turns and a 3/3. That's 18 damage. You're dead.
Is this still the judge present?
No, that's Josh.
Okay, I was just making sure the judge wasn't like, okay, yeah, we can scoop here. I don't know what we did there, Josh. I don't know what we achieved, but you have taken 20 minutes off the clock, and you have to win 2 games in the 30 minutes remaining. So go to your sideboard, see what options you have. Josh is looking at 3 Kroll Harpooners, 3 Duress, 2 Thrashing Brontodon, 2 Negate, 2 Fungal Infection, 2 Carnage Tyrant, and a Sorceress Spyglass. Jerry, what do you like here?
Sorceress Spyglass is good against Escanta, good against Tamiyo. couple copies of Negate and 3 copies of Duress for Disruption, 2 Thrashing Brontodon to go after Azcanta and Wilderness Reclamation. You might even want Crawl Harpooner just as a clock.
Meanwhile, we're looking over on Abe's side. 3 Crawl Harpooners, 2 Negate, 2 Narset, Parter of Veils, 2 Carnage Tyrant, 2 Arboreal Grazer, 1 Thrashing Brontodon, 1 Crushing Canopy, 1 Biogenic Ooze, 1 Atsakan Archer. Jerry, what would you like to do on the Simic Nexus side?
Biogenic Ooze, full stop? I don't know. I mean, I don't think you really want Negate to try and fight their Negates and Duresses. That's just kind of a losing proposition. You could make a case for Narset as an extra card advantage piece because you know your opponent's going to be bringing in Disruption, but the Sultai deck also has a bunch of random green animals that are going to be able to attack that Planeswalker very easily, so I don't know, man. You're the Simic Nexus expert.
Yeah, in the past, sideboarding has been very limited against the Sultai mid-range decks. You can do Negate if you're interested. You might have to fight Counter Wars. Vivian Reed is generally a pretty good card against you, so Negate goes up a bit in value. But Biogenic Ooze was really the play in post-board games. It's very strong against Sultai mid-range, and a lot of times you lean on that. But you're right, there's just not much sideboarding required here. This is a Simic-favored matchup. This is one of the matchups that Simic absolutely preys on. And like you said, not a ton of it here today, but I'm sure Abe excited to finally get to square off against the former scourge of Standard in Sultai mid-range. And also probably Abe excited to just go ahead and take all the turns in the world. I mean, you're not punishing your Simic Nexus opponent when you make them do that. That's what they're here for. They want to take all the turns and cast Callous Dismissal over a bunch of turns, not hurting them.
Back in the day, I would have been all about this. I think it would have been really fun. I played decks like Mirari's Wake, if you remember that one.
Oh, absolutely.
And that involved just a lot of kind of nonsensical game actions, too.
Moment's Piecing for a bunch of turns.
Oh, Moment's Piece is so good. That card is up there as like one of my favorite / least favorite cards of all time.
And yet, a Simic Nexus hater. It should be right up your alley.
This was 15 years ago, man.
You're like, I've grown. I've grown past this.
I've gotten old, is what has happened. I don't have time for this.
I understand.
The APM is lower. The brain doesn't work as well as it did back in the day.
Right. Our time on this planet is rapidly dwindling. We don't have time to waste turns on Simic Nexus anymore.
Well,
I get you.
I spend my time doing a bunch of nonsense that isn't really conducive to anything. You know, I'm not exactly making the best of what little time I have left, but
you know, to each their own. Meanwhile, if you want to make the best of your time as you watch SCG today, make sure you're subscribed over on Twitch. A lot of benefits there. You get to decide the quarterfinals. There's also custom emoticons and badges. Jerry, what's our favorite emoticon that's present?
The Simic Nexus?
No, not the Simic
Game.
Nexus. It's game.
Game.
Spam the game emoticon right now. Do it up. Only $4.99 a month. Also, you can use those Twitch Prime subscriptions you might have hanging around from Amazon Prime. You head over to twitch.tv/SCG Tour and drop that subscription today.
I think my Twitch Prime is about to be free in a couple days.
There you go. Make sure you're using it effectively. You always want to have that Twitch Prime applied to something.
I try and spread the love.
No, that's good. Hop around to your favorite content creators. Do a sub to each of their Twitch streams. I'm sure they all appreciate that. We love all of our fellow content creators out there, all the people working hard on Twitch every day. Props to them.
Who should I sub to?
Who you been watching a lot lately?
I don't think I have subbed to Canister yet.
Okay.
And I've been watching him a lot. I watched him a decent amount leading up to MC London and a little bit after the fact too. He was playing humans for a bit, was playing crazy Pull from Eternity, Narset, Goryo's Vengeance deck. Ended up just playing War of Invention. I was kind of disappointed, but then he was doing some like War of the Spark stuff during the streamer release events, and recently has been doing the Neoform combo.
Yep. Yeah, I enjoy Canister's stream a lot. I think you need to acclimate yourself to his humor, and then once you do, one of the most enjoyable streams out there on Twitch for sure. So we're back to taking relevant game actions. That means we'll actually talk about what's happening on your screen. Just a couple lands thus far. Abe Stein gonna go Hinterland Harbor into Blast Zone. Joshua Stewart's gonna take a read of that card. Meanwhile, Josh just developing mana on his side. A couple breeding pools thus far.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out the Twitch app. I don't know how to sub to someone. I normally do it
You
via...
have to do it via desktop, actually. I don't know if you can you sub from your phone? You must be able to, right?
Yeah. I mean, that would be a very poor decision on Twitch's part.
That would be a big leak. Here's the Jade Light Ranger from Josh Stewart. Abe's just going to play a land, take 4 from the Jade Light Ranger. You love when that Jade Light Ranger starts on 4 power against your Simic opponent. That's how you steal these games. Here's a Merfolk Branchwalker. That's going to be 3 power and Thrashing Brontodon on top. Very, very impactful card in this matchup.
That's a good one. Simic Nexus is capable of winning without Wilderness Reclamation. It is just a lot more difficult.
And here's another Branchwalker, and this is the recipe for stealing a game as Sultai midrange. You get some early power on the board. You have Brontodon to take care of that first Wilderness Reclamation, and you can just run away with the game real quick.
So I figured out how I could block or report Canister, but not sub to him.
Well, those are both options in play. I think you would appreciate the sub more, but there's Thrashing Brontodon entering the battlefield, ready to deal with the first Wilderness Reclamation that may come down.
Do you think...
There is that Wilderness Reclamation. And Josh is going to respond to it before we get to end step, and that's just going to be the game.
I was going to say, do you think Abe was just like ready to concede? I feel like he could have put a counter on that Blast Zone, and that potentially would have been a little helpful, but...
Yeah, I think he was just...
he was like, I'm dead.
He was just checking to see if Josh knew he had to fire that off before end step. But I'm assuming if he played it, he probably didn't have anything else in hand anyway, so... Yeah, good draw from Josh there. We're able to quickly steal a game away from the Simic Nexus deck. That's the recipe. Lots of high-power Explorer creatures. 1 Thrashing Brontodon.
Yeah. Clock plus Disruption.
On the play helps a lot, for sure. We'll see if Josh can put that together again here as we head into Game 3. But that was a much faster affair than our first game.
Yeah. I don't know if you're in Abe's spot and you want to get a little bit of revenge, you know, while your opponent's doing their thing, you go to the restroom.
Right.
It's like, well, hold on, you're attacking me for lethal, but...
But I really have to go to the restroom right now. That's one way of doing it.
Maybe if it comes down to that in Game 3, we'll see. So maybe this game we'll see Abe aggressively mulliganing a little bit more to try and have a more robust explosive draw. Like, Sultai is obviously a favored matchup for Simic Nexus, but yeah, you still gotta work. You know? You still have to do your thing. And
yeah, both players kept 7 there too, so Abe thought he had something. But we really just didn't see a whole lot from Abe. It was just lands, Wilderness Reclamation, I'm dead. Simic is one of those decks where the fail states look real bad, right? Your deck just does nothing, spins its wheels,
right.
Your opponent does whatever they want, and then the game's over. And you often see that come up in the context of Simic Nexus versus Mono Red.
Yeah, just because so few of your cards actually interact with them in a favorable axis, so... You might see like an Opt, a Growth Spiral, and then, yeah, okay, you're dead on turn 4 because you put up 0 resistance.
So Abe has kept 7. Josh taking a look here. Doesn't look thrilled. Is going to keep, though. I guess he's on 6 already.
Yeah, a crying keep, as we call it.
Yeah, not super pleased with his hand here. Let's see what he can get going. Going to start with the tap land. Abe Stein leading on Search for Azcanta. Josh takes a draw. Does he have a 2-drop? He does. It's Merfolk Branchwalker. And it's going to be a 3-power Merfolk Branchwalker. It matters a lot in this matchup. Passes the turn back to Abe.
Exploring away yet another Branchwalker.
So Abe revealed Nexus of Fate. via search for Escanto.
Yeah, a little awkward.
Just going to do a shuffle here.
Every card matters for filling the graveyard in these early turns for search for Escanto.
Absolutely.
But if Abe gets to plus a Tamio, then it's
Fills quickly.
trivial.
Yeah, Tamio's great filling the graveyard. Abe's just going to play Blast Zone, passes the turn over to Josh Stewart. Going to swing in for 3 points of damage. Abe falls to 17. Josh has Sorcerer's Spyglass. We'll get you the name on that in just a moment. Meanwhile, Abe's going to tick up that Blast Zone 2-2. Josh is going to have a look. Abe's hand, Chemist's Insight, 2 roots there, and 2 lands.
That's not bad.
That's nice. Going to buy plenty of time. Going to find some more cards with that Chemist's Insight.
The problem with hands like these is that if Josh is able to shut down the engine pieces and the Chemist's Insight doesn't necessarily turn up any other engine pieces, you could just flood out, have some root snares, you'll buy some time, but you really need like this critical mass of things to actually get going. And I think the addition of Tamio certainly helps with that a lot. Yeah, probably wondering what to name with the Sorcerer's Spyglass. Like, do you name Search for Escanta? Do you name Escanta the Sunken Ruin? I know you have to name a card. Is that actually a real card that I can name?
Yeah, Josh is consulting with the judge right now. Trying to figure out exactly what he's going to name. And he did, in fact, name Blast Zone. Oh, and here's a Wilderness Reclamation off the top for Abe Stein. Great draw there.
Free spell.
Exactly what he was looking for. Let's see if Josh has an answer for that engine piece. Here's 3 damage from the Merfolk Branchwalker. Llanowar Elves is the follow-up. Here's Chemist's Insight.
And Abe Stein kind of off to the races at this point. Wilderness Reclamation, definitely the best possible draw there.
Oh, absolutely.
Abe going to get to play some card drawing this turn, still have a free untap at the end step to Root Snare if he wants to, maybe play some more card drawing if he's able to find another Chemist's Insight.
Here's a Growth Spiral from Abe.
Oh, into another Growth Spiral.
Another Growth Spiral. Just get this mana train rolling. There's another land.
All these cantrips filling up the graveyard.
Abe has Nexus in hand, too. So I mean, this could honestly just be the end. It might all spiral from here.
Yeah, end step 2 mana floating, trigger Wilderness Reclamation.
Going to cast a Root Snare to fill up the graveyard. Now going to cast Nexus of Fate. And that means as long as Nexus of Fate is not on top of the library.
Even if it is, you just get to rebuy, so
exactly.
it's not a big deal.
He's at the 7 land breakpoint now where it doesn't matter. So, yes. Nothing really horrible that could show up on the top of the deck here.
This is a quick turnaround.
Yeah.
Went from like, oh, is Abe's draw that good? Needs some help from Chemist's Insight, Wilderness Reclamation off the top, and then the Insight just allowed you to chain cantrips, put a bunch of lands onto the battlefield, and game.
Yep. Here's the search activation. That's going to turn up another Wilderness Reclamation, which equals another search activation. Assume Abe's just going to go ahead and deploy that here. I guess if you had a Tamio, you might pass on it. But no, there's a Wilderness Reclamation.
And step 2 triggers. Activate Escanta again.
Let's take a peek. What can we find?
Obviously looking for another Nexus of Fate, but realistically it's not that big of a deal because Josh's draw was not very great.
Yep.
So.
Abe finds a Tamio. Float a little bit more mana as we head into this next phase.
Activate Escanta, 1 mana still floating.
Had another shot at Nexus there, but not to be. It's Negate instead, and that should cover basically anything Josh could do that could really throw a wrench in Abe's plans right now. We've got some more mana to spend, though. It's Chemist's Insight from the graveyard. 2 more cards. Saw an island, didn't catch the last one. But we're going to pass back to Josh's turn now. What can Josh muster? Only 3 mana available presently.
Yeah, at this point there are a lot of cards that interact with what Abe is doing. You can blow up a Wilderness Reclamation, you can cast a Duress, have a Negate in hand, but realistically, Abe's just too far ahead at this point.
Yeah, and Abe's just going to go ahead and cast Root Snare here. Padding that life total even further. I would expect we'll see Tamiyo on this turn. There's the Nexus of Fate off the top.
All over.
Yeah, I think this is a wrap. I think we're probably going to see Abe take a bunch more turns. Here, I have no objection to Josh making him play it out. I mean, we've gotten to the stage in the game. There's not going to be any more games beyond this point. If you want Abe to show you your combo here, I think that's fine. Josh going to respond with the Negate. Abe has the Negate, though. Protects Tamiyo. Pluses. Assume we're naming Nexus of Fate here. We missed, but the deck does get 4 cards smaller.
Yeah, did you miss?
Yeah.
I mean,
you kind of can't miss at some point, right? Here's the Nexus of Fate. Do a little shuffling.
Shuffle that back in, increase the Nexus of Fate density, then activate the Azcanta.
Right, just good mechanics. You always want as many Nexuses in your deck as possible whenever you're casting draw spells, casting search spells. Gonna grab a Growth Spiral here is Abe. Floats some mana, untaps everything. Time for another Azcanta activation. There is the Nexus of Fate.
1 mana short, though, looks like.
He'll have to hold it to the next turn. I think Abe will be okay with that. Gonna cast a Growth Spiral. Not much chance of fizzling at this point. Here's Chemister's Insight. And then we're going to keep track of the Nexus of Fate turns up there on the left-hand side. 2 more cards enter Abe's hand. And we go to another turn. Abe's going to plus Tamiyo here. Again, assuming Nexus of Fate. It was. Nexus of Fate going to go to hand. Could have cast the other one first, but not super critical at this juncture,
Yeah,
honestly.
very, very small. Obviously, like a little sloppy, but regardless, Abe is taking like a winning line. It might not be like the technically optimal line.
Yep.
But he knows that he is going to win. He is going to be able to take all the turns here.
Yep.
It's all over.
I think he's even safe from a time perspective. He doesn't have to bounce all that much with Callous Dismissal before he actually wins. I mean, in fact, he has to bounce nothing. No blockers available, so.
Well, the Biogenic Ooze, I assume, came in, and
Can just grab that.
That just kills so quickly. You're going to find all the Reclamations and have a bunch of mana.
Yep. Yeah, no real time pressure here from Abe. Again, though, no objection to Josh making Abe do it here, go through the motions. Not really any benefit to a scoop, but this time he is going to offer the hand. And Abe Stein takes down Sultai midrange. 2 games to 1.
Josh has already gone to the restroom.
he's got everything done he needs to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Could maybe try and do a little bit more multitasking, but.
Well, you got a little Simic in your life there, Jerry. How'd you feel about that?